Assalamu alaikum students. I hope you all are doing well. Today is Sunday 10th of May 2020 and today we are going to learn about a topic that's about clauses from your students book page number 69. In today's class you will be able to know about the use of clauses and what are clauses. You will be able to recognize and identify independent and subordinate clauses. What is a clause? A clause is a group of words that has a subject and a verb. Students, there are two types of clauses, independent clauses and subordinate clauses. Independent clauses are also called main clauses because they are a complete thought. They make sense on its own. And what is a subordinate clause? A subordinate clause supports the main clause. It is also called dependent clause because it depends upon the main clause to complete a sentence. Let's have a look at the example of independent clause. I went to town. It was red. Now these are the independent clauses. Let's have a look at the examples of subordinate clauses, supporting clauses. After the storm cleared, because he didn't like chocolate. These are the examples of dependent clauses which are also called subordinate clauses. What is a clause? A clause is a group of words that has a subject and a verb. Students, last week we discussed about simple and compound sentences. What is a sentence? A sentence is a group of words that has a subject, verb and object. So what's the difference between a sentence and a clause? Students, a sentence can consist of one clause, two clauses or more than two clauses. For example, she was tired is a clause that is a complete sentence. She went to bed, it's also a complete thought. She went to bed because she was tired. So, how many clauses do we have here? Two clauses. She went to bed because she was tired. So, we can see this sentence consists of two clauses.
Hi, in this quick video I will define a clause and explain the differences between an independent and a dependent clause using several examples. A clause is a group of related words that consist of both a subject and a verb. The following sentence is a clause. The student studied in the library. You can see that the sentence contains a subject, in this case the student, and a verb, studied. It is important to note that both the subject and the verb is required to form a clause. If you only have either a subject or a verb, the group of words may form a phrase, but not a complete clause. For example, the group of word studies biology is not a clause because it does not contain a subject. To be a clause, there needs to be a subject in the sentence. You need to identify who it is that studies biology. For example, a complete clause would be Jane studies biology. Clauses can be independent or dependent. Understanding the difference between independent and dependent clauses can help you to avoid fragments in your writing and to vary the lengths of your sentences. This helps you to improve your writing and can also make your writing sound more academic. An independent clause makes sense on its own. It is a complete thought. In other words, an independent clause is a group of words that can stand alone as a complete sentence. Here are two examples. The teacher explained the difference between an electron and a proton. And the research demonstrates that the new vaccine effectively eliminates viral load in patients. Each of these sentences form a complete thought and can stand alone. Therefore, each of these sentences represents an independent clause. A dependent clause is not a complete thought and needs more information to be complete. In other words, a dependent clause cannot stand alone as a complete sentence. It needs to be attached to an independent clause to be complete. Here are two examples. While I was studying in the library, if the teacher does not provide the class notes on time. In both examples, the sentence is not complete. You do not know what happened while the person was studying in the library, or what will happen if the teacher does not provide the notes on time. As such, these clauses are dependent, as they need more information to be complete. There are certain clues that can help you to identify the dependent clauses in a sentence. You can look for punctuation clues such as commas and brackets, and you can look for certain words that are commonly used to mark a dependent clause. Examples of these words include while, if, unless, although, because, since, and when. Use of any of these words indicate a dependent clause.
I hope students you have enjoyed the video and it was helpful to understand the use of clauses. So to sum up, we can say clauses are a group of words with a verb, and a clause is a part of a sentence. There are two types of clauses. The main clauses, that is the most important clause because it has the main meaning of a sentence. Then there is a subordinate clause that helps the main clause to complete a thought, to complete the sentence. For example, he got a present. It's a main clause. He was lonely. That's the subordinate clause. There is another example. Pandora was curious. That is the main clause. She opened the box. That is the subordinate clause. Students, subordinate clauses add extra to the main clause. They are used to enhance the meanings of the main clauses. And you can see the use of joining words, conjunctions, because and so to join these two clauses. Let's talk about the conjunctions. Conjunctions. Students, conjunctions are used to start subordinate clauses. Every subordinate clause or dependent clause start with the conjunctions. Here you can see a collection of conjunctions and some others are because, so, but. Can you use the conjunctions to make a subordinate clause for this sentence? This is a main clause. Let's have a look at the example. After she had eaten lunch, she walked for an hour. So what is the conjunction after? What is the subordinate clause? After she had eaten lunch. Sometimes we need to use comma to mark where the subordinate clause is. There are some rules that will help us to know when to use comma. If the subordinate clause start the sentence, if a sentence start with a subordinate clause, we have to use comma after the subordinate clause. For example, before we go swimming, we have to go to school. What is the subordinate clause? Before we go swimming. And you can see the comma. If a sentence start with the main clause, no need to use comma. For example, we have to go to school before we go swimming. So students, remember, if sentence start with a subordinate clause, use comma after subordinate clause. If a sentence start with the main clause, no need to use comma after the main clause. Sometimes we have additional information in the middle of the sentence and we have to use a comma before and after it. For example, tomorrow morning when the clock strikes 9, school will begin. So you can see the additional information when the clock strikes 9 has been started and ended by using commas. A subordinate clause can come at various points in a sentence. It can come at the front of the sentence, it can come at the end of the sentence, or it can be used in the middle of the sentence. For example, You might use one at the front of a sentence. Because she was curious, she opened the box. Now what is because she was curious? It's a subordinate clause and we are using it at the front of the sentence. She went home after school because she needed an early tea. Here we have used subordinate clause at the end of the sentence. My brother Ali, who lives in Australia, is coming home for Eid. Now we have used the subordinate clause in the middle of the sentence. So a subordinate clause can come in the beginning, at the start of the sentence, at the end of the sentence, or in the middle of the sentence. These are the two questions from your student's book, page number 69, question number 2 and question number 3. In question number 2, we have been asked to give each of these main clauses a subordinate clause and we have to use the word in brackets to join the two clauses. So main clause is with us, we have to add a subordinate clause by using the given conjunctions. And after that, we have been given a subordinate clause and we have to add a main clause. Let's take these two questions separately. So let's add a subordinate clause. Alia blushed. Alia blushed is the main clause. So, what is the subordinate clause followed by because? Alia blushed because she was very happy. Ben was irritating her. So, Ben was irritating her is the main clause. What is the subordinate clause? Ben was irritating her, so she opened the box. She opened the box is the subordinate clause. Sarah raised her hand. That is the main clause. What should be the subordinate clause? Sarah raised her hand because she has a question, or we can say she wants to ask a question. Now students, we have to add a main clause. We have been given a subordinate clause that can come at the beginning of the sentence, at the start of a sentence, in the middle of the sentence, or it can come at the end of a sentence. So here we have a subordinate clause at the start of a sentence. Let's add a main clause. Before the food gets cold, go sit at the table. What is the main clause? Go sit at the table. Now students, we have to add a main clause. We have been given a subordinate clause that can come at the beginning of the sentence, at the start of a sentence, in the middle of the sentence, or it can come at the end of a sentence. So here we have a subordinate clause at the start of a sentence. Let's add a main clause. Before the food gets cold, go sit at the table. What is the main clause? Go sit at the table. Here we have subordinate clause at the end of a sentence and we have to add a main clause. What we can add in the main clause? I will walk to school because I can't wait for the bus. When the president arrives, that is the subordinate clause. What we can add in the main clause? When the president arrives, he will give a speech. Because it was raining heavily, that is the subordinate clause. Let's add a main clause. Sports day was cancelled because it was raining heavily. Sports day was cancelled is the main clause. Because it was raining heavily is the subordinate clause. But he is tired this evening. That is the subordinate clause. Let's add the main clause. He usually loves to walk, but he is tired this evening. So what is the main clause? He usually loves to walk, but he is tired this evening is the subordinate clause. Students, it's your turn now. That's the page of your workbook, page number 39, question number 1. And what you have to do, color the main clauses in the red and the subordinate clauses in the blue. Circle the conjunction in green. Question number 2 is you have to draw lines to match the beginning of the sentence to the correct conjunction and then to the correct subordinate clause. So these are the two tasks you have to do. I hope you are able to identify and recognize the subordinate clauses and the main clauses. That's all for today. See you in the next class. Have a good day.